Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. My name is Adam Okada, one of the clinical educators here at Healthmark. Our host, Kevin Anderson, can't be here today, so you're stuck with me. But we do have our newest educator with Healthmark, Mr. Michael Matthews. We're so happy to have him on the team. Michael, can you give just a little bit of a background and introduction to the listeners?
For sure, and you may have heard of me before. This is actually my second time to do the podcast, but this is my first time as an employee of Healthmark. So, as Adam said, I am new to the team. I come from sterile processing. I've been a technician, been a manager, but then I moved over being an educator for a vendor, and I've done that for several years at this point. Spoken at a lot of conferences, done a lot of hospital evaluations and podcasts and publications. And so you may or may not have seen me around. I'm certainly not new to the Healthmark team in terms of relationships, but I am new in terms of employment. So, and it is a lot of fun. I'm very glad to be here. It's a fantastic team, and I feel like it's a real honor to be a part of that team.
Well, we're honored to have you. I mean, if I had to put like my favorite speakers, like top five speakers in the industry, you are absolutely on my list of the best
Wow,
speakers in our industry. So
that's very
having
encouraging. Thank
you with
you.
Healthmark, yeah, having you with Healthmark is a big deal. So I want to talk about the 2025 March webinar that you just
Mhm.
did for Healthmark, talking about introverts at industry conferences. Such a great topic. I myself have been an introvert, so I know what it's like to be overwhelmed at an industry event like that, and when there's so many people. Can you speak about what it means to be an introvert and
For
maybe
sure.
some misconceptions that people have about it?
Well, and I'm glad you bring up that, you identify as an introvert too. I certainly do as well. And it's interesting because, as I kind of talked about this idea while, we were developing the material and all that stuff, it really was remarkable the number of people that I talked to who say, yeah, that's my experience too. And so if you are out there and you're listening to this, and you feel that way, you're not alone. Like I think there's an awful lot of us in sterile processing who are introverts. So, what does that mean to be an introvert? And I think we can start with the misconceptions because I think a lot of times people, when they say introvert, they use words like shy or they use words like social anxiety or antisocial. And to be fair, sometimes I use those words about myself too. But I don't think that's really what it necessarily means to be an introvert. I think that, as we'll get into probably here in a little bit, I think that's the result of not being mindful about what it means to be an introvert. And so, really, what we mean when we say introvert, it's really about how do you get your energy. And when we talk about energy, I mean like your mental focus, your emotional focus, those things that really kind of make you comfortable and drive you. And for introverts, we recharge our batteries really by being alone or in very small, tight knit groups. Whereas an extrovert on the opposite end, they recharge their batteries by being very social, having a lot of external stimulus, going out, meeting new people, all those sorts of things. That's where they get a lot of their energy. We, on the other hand, get our energy from being usually alone or again, like in a very tight knit group of family. And so, or friends. And I think when we start to feel those things like social anxiety or being antisocial, what we really mean is I've depleted my battery and I just like I've hit that point where I just can't do anything else or I don't want to be around anybody else. And it's kind of like it's like our brain is screaming out, recharge me. And when we feel that empty feeling, that feeling of being on E, that's a sign like we haven't really managed our energy very well.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like when you were given that during the webinar, I felt like you were talking like right at me, like right to me, because I have escaped to my hotel room just to sit in a dark, quiet room to get
Yep.
out of just the noise and motion and just so many people, and you're nodding and smiling at everybody, and you feel like a
Yep.
robot. You're just like, I just got to get out of
Same.
here. And
Yep.
when I come back, I always feel better. Like it's just that social battery, you drain it, and then you have to recharge it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
for introverts like us, attending a conference event or an in-person event is really intimidating. It can
Hmm.
feel overwhelming, and I know for me, before I did it for the first time, I was intimidated. Like I was really like
Hmm.
I was nervous about being around all those people.
For
But
sure.
there are a lot of benefits for even introverts to go to these events. What are some of those benefits that people can look forward to as far as going to one of these events and what they can get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really feel like the kind of cutting edge research, the newest things that are happening in the industry are usually being talked about mainly at in-person events first. They will eventually get spoken about on virtual events and webinars and that sort of thing, but really where they start is that in-person event. And the second really big one, I think, is the one that also sounds like the thing that gives us the most anxiety is networking. And you're right. Like, I think most people, when they hear that word networking and you're introverted, you immediately think, like, oh no, that's the thing I don't want to do. And I totally agree and I totally understand that. But the reality is that without networking, your career growth, your professional growth will always be hamstrung. You will always be working at a disadvantage if you don't figure out how to make networking work for you. And really, I think that's kind of the biggest piece to this is, when we think about networking, we have this misconception that that means I've got to go out and make small talk with 200 people. And that just sounds like a nightmare scenario for somebody like us. And you don't have to do that. Instead, you can make it work for you by being intentional and really focusing on quality over quantity. So I would personally rather make 5 quality connections than 50 shallow connections, right? And as introverts, we do tend to gravitate towards these very close personal connections and to feel more benefit in those than we do with those very shallow ones. And so what I'm suggesting is that we can make that work for us by, instead of thinking about trying to get 50 shallow connections, really just try to focus on a couple of very high quality ones. And as you do that, you will see more career growth and more professional opportunities come to you.
Yeah, because and you said it during the webinar, it's all about who you know.
Yep,
Your career path and your knowledge and your skills are great, but if people don't know who you are, it's going to be really difficult for you to crack that final interview or get into that final interview range because your resume is going to look very similar to other people.
absolutely.
But
Yeah,
if
and
somebody has a relationship with you or knows you, it can be a lot easier.
yeah, and I mean, let's be real, right? You can't really ever break through without some form of networking. And you may say that's not fair or that doesn't feel right. But at a certain point, it just is what it is, right? And you have to adapt if you want to move forward. And I think that that's kind of the kick in the pants that a lot of introverts, including myself, just have to get over is the fact that if we really want to advance our careers, networking is inevitably part of it. And so if we're going to do it, we got to figure out how to do it well and we got to figure out how to do it effectively, hopefully without stressing ourselves out and driving us, to madness in the process.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that was my career path as well. I mean, I started in 2006 and I worked my way up within my department and within, the
Hmm.
hospital system until about 2016. And at that point, that was when I really started to branch out and get into the industry events. I joined the Amy groups
Yep.
and started writing the standards. And once I started networking and meeting the people that were in those spaces, all of a sudden job opportunities started
Yeah.
opening up. And I thought that I was just stuck and I knew I could do those things, right? I had the knowledge, I had the passion, but I just couldn't get an opportunity. And that's what
Yeah.
networking really did for me. Um, if you're an introvert to go into a conference, what strategies would you give somebody who might be nervous or hesitant to attend a conference with what they know is going to be a lot of people?
Yeah, and I think that key word that you just used there is strategy, right? And strategy means that you have to intentionally think about what your challenges are and what your strengths are and work to maximize those strengths while minimizing those challenges. And you might look at this and say, listen, I know that I've got a limited social battery. That's a challenge. So how am I going to use my strengths, excuse me, how am I going to use my strengths to overcome those challenges? And that was really kind of a big focus of the presentation was to say, well, step one, introverts tend to be very deliberate thinkers. Let's use that deliberate thinker energy on something like preparing for the conference rather than just showing up and just trying to do everything. Like, let's be intentional about what are the things that I want to do. And so that's kind of like step one, I would say, is before you go to a conference, ask yourself, what do I need to get out of this? And again, that might be answering a challenge that you're having in your department, like maybe you're struggling with water staining, or maybe you're struggling with staffing or whatever. What maybe it's answering that question, but maybe it is just trying to like advance my career. And so I'm going to be thinking about, like, if I want to be an educator, I need to start making connection with companies that I know hire educators, right? And so whatever it is that your goal is, know what that goal is, and then just kind of build your energy spend around meeting that goal. And I think that's where so many introverts really mess up, is we go to these conferences with no goal in mind, and we just start kind of doing everything, trying to do everything, and we spend that social battery so quickly without ever getting anything out of it. And we kind of look at it at the end of the day and say, well, I just got a whole bunch of stress and I didn't get anything out of it. What's the point, right? And the point is, you didn't go in with a goal. And if you don't go in with a goal, you can't accomplish anything.
Yeah, no, and I would encourage anybody who's listening to go watch the webinar with Michael, because it gives so many tips and just individual. Like, I love the elevator pitch idea, like
Mhm.
being able to communicate yourself and kind of your bio or your resume. You don't want to list all the things you've done, but give an elevator pitch. What makes you interesting, unique, what different, and what makes you kind of stand out that you can give in a couple of sentences, right? And
Yeah,
that's how you're going to introduce yourself to people. And that's something you can prepare ahead of time. And I think that was really good advice. So, any
absolutely.
final thoughts here before we end the podcast? Any final thoughts you want to give to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I would encourage people to do is just interact with these local events or the national event. And if the national event itself is a little overwhelming, a smaller group at a local event can be a good stepping stone to a larger event. But the main thing that I really want to leave people with is kind of what we said earlier, is that, you know, my heart goes out to somebody who has all the knowledge, they have the certifications, they're looking to make that next step in their career, and they're just kind of sitting there waiting for it to happen, and nothing's happening. And the reality is that what the ingredient that they're missing is that networking piece. Just like the example you show from your own personal experience, I think that's incredibly common. That once we start kind of making ourselves get out there with the intentionality and having a few strategies under our belt, you will be shocked at how fast those opportunities start to flood into you.
Yeah, completely agree. Everybody out there, go check out the March 2025 webinar on the Healthmark Academy with our own Michael Matthews. Very excited to have you on the team. Michael, thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for listening.
My pleasure.